Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today we have my Week 10 college football predictions. So last week I had a record of 11-7, which brings my overall season record to 122 correct and 44 incorrect. So diving right in, we have Georgia visiting Missouri. So Georgia is the clear #1 team in the country. There's other undefeated teams like Oklahoma and Cincinnati, even though Cincinnati's not a Power 5 team. But you could clearly see Georgia is playing on another level than Oklahoma because Oklahoma is barely beating teams like Kansas. They're undefeated, but they're barely winning. So Georgia's beaten their tougher opponents like Florida and Kentucky very easily. And Missouri is a mediocre team. Georgia's going to dominate from start to finish 45-6. Ohio State against Nebraska. So Ohio State is a great team, and Nebraska is decent. Ohio State has owned them recently, winning by 35-plus points in 4 of the last 5 matchups. And I think Ohio State is going to dominate, winning 48-24. Wake Forest at North Carolina. So this is one of the few games this week that could go either way. Both teams have great offenses and not great defenses, so I'm looking for a lot of points to be scored. Wake Forest averages 43.4 points per game, whereas North Carolina averages 36.5 points per game. Wake Forest allows 23 points per game, well, really 24 when you round, and North Carolina averages giving up about 31 points per game. It's going to be a shootout. I have both teams scoring over 40 points. I really think it's going to be the winner will be the first team to hit either like 45 or 50, and I have that team being Wake Forest, winning 51-42. Liberty at Ole Miss. So 2 great quarterbacks are on display here. With Ole Miss, they have Heisman contender Matt Corral, and Liberty, they have Malik Willis. So both quarterbacks. So people are debating who's the top quarterback in the draft, and they're definitely debating between these two, or most are. That they have Kenny Pickett in there, but these two are the main two that they're debating who's the best quarterback in the draft. And they're going to both shine, but Ole Miss is going to beat Liberty 44-34 because they're the better overall team. Illinois at Minnesota. So Illinois is not a great team, however they have beaten teams like Penn State and Nebraska. They're very good running the ball, and Minnesota allows 222 rush yards per game. So I expect Illinois to be able to run the football like they did against Penn State. Probably getting most of their yards running the ball. Against Penn State, they had over 330 yards on the ground. I think Minnesota will come out on top, but I think it's going to be close. It's going to be 27-21 Minnesota. Next up, we have Pitt visiting Duke. So Pitt was upset last week by Miami, but I don't think Pitt's going to lose to the worst team in the ACC, Duke. Pitt's going to win behind a strong game from Kenny Pickett, 42-13. I'm not saying he's going to throw for 519 yards like he did last week, but he's going to throw for quite a few yards, and he's going to lead them past Duke. Michigan State at Purdue. So this is a potential letdown game for Michigan State after their great win over Michigan last week. Purdue's already defeated the top 5 team this season in a letdown game, being Iowa, after they beat Penn State. But Michigan State is better than Iowa, and although Purdue has a good run defense, Kenneth Walker is just such a good running back. He's going to show why he's a clear Heisman contender, as Michigan State beats Purdue 31-21. Tulsa at Cincinnati. So Cincinnati was very underrated in the college football playoff rankings. I think they're a top 4 team currently, and if the playoffs started now, they should definitely be in it. Tulsa's 3-5, and I think Cincinnati's going to defeat Tulsa easily 37-18. Next up, we have Navy visiting Notre Dame. Notre Dame has won 8 of the last 10 matchups. Navy is a triple option team, and Notre Dame's defense is good, but it's difficult stopping the triple option because you have to contain the triple option, because obviously Navy's going to be able to move the ball, because it's nearly impossible to completely stop and shut down the triple option. So Navy's going to They're going to be able to move the ball, but I don't think Notre Dame is going to allow them to score much. I have Navy scoring only 13 points, but I have Notre Dame scoring only 30 because Navy likes to take a lot of time off the clock on their drives. And as you saw against the game against Cincinnati, they were able to limit their opponent to 27 points because they take forever on a drive. They take 10 to 15 minutes, that's a whole quarter on a drive. So it takes them a while, and that's one of their advantages because they just run the clock down, so the other teams don't have much time to score. But I still have Notre Dame being able to score 30 points to Navy's 13. Oklahoma State at West Virginia. West Virginia upset Iowa State last week, and they're a pretty good team. So when they're losing, they're barely losing. For example, they lost to Oklahoma by 3 points, where they didn't trail at all until the outcome of the game. They lost to Maryland by 6 points, Texas Tech by 6 points, and they lost to Baylor in a blowout. But you have to give them credit. Baylor is a really good team this year. So I think it's going to be close, but this is another one of the few games that could go either way. I could see West Virginia with the upset, but I have Oklahoma State squeaking out with the 38-34 win. Next up, we have the team I was just talking about, Baylor. We have them playing TCU. Baylor's been playing great this season. They're 5-1 with their only loss to a very good Oklahoma State team. That's also a one-loss team with their only loss to Iowa State. Baylor is a great team, and I think it's going to show in their 34-21 win over TCU. Next up, we have probably the best game of the week, Auburn visiting Texas A&M. So Auburn's 6-2 with losses against Penn State and Georgia, but they do have impressive wins. Some of those include Ole Miss, Arkansas, and LSU. A&M has been good after their 2 losses to Mississippi State and Arkansas, and Mississippi State is shaping out to be a pretty good team this season. And Arkansas, they started off good, but then they've sort of fallen off. But they're not bad. They're still pretty good. Texas A&M's home, but Auburn will escape, or I think they're going to escape with the 28-24 victory. But it definitely could be Texas A&M. I mean, they beat Alabama at home, so there's no reason they can't beat Auburn when Alabama's clearly better than Auburn. But I think Auburn's just going to be a little bit better in this game. Specifically, a great game from Bo Nix, as he's been playing great the month of October. And I expect it to continue into the month of November, with him carrying Auburn to the win. Idaho State at BYU. This game's over from now. Idaho State has 1 win against UC Davis, and they play in the FCS, which is the subdivision, and they've lost to every other team. I have BYU absolutely dominating this game, 56-7. Next up, we have Wisconsin visiting Rutgers. Wisconsin has been much better after getting off to a slow start. They're 5-3, but they have wins over Purdue and Iowa. And their losses are all to good teams: Penn State, Notre Dame, and Michigan. 2 of those teams are top 10 teams, being Notre Dame and Michigan. But I think Wisconsin's going to keep going towards a Big Ten title berth with a 21-10 win over Rutgers. Next up, we have Mississippi State and Arkansas. Both teams actually beat Texas A&M, as I mentioned before. So Mississippi State is a pretty good team. They beat Kentucky, Texas A&M, and NC State. Arkansas is also a good team. It's their home, and it's a tough test on the road for Mississippi State, but it's also a good test for Arkansas. Both teams are pretty good. I think they're both rather even. I think Mississippi State will escape with the win, 31-27. Next, we have NC State at Florida State. NC State is 6-2 with losses to Mississippi State and Miami. And Florida State hasn't been good this season, but all their losses are very close. And because of that, I don't have a reason to think Florida State's not going to keep this game close. But I do think NC State will come out with the win, 34-28. Next up, we have LSU at Alabama. So Alabama is a very dominant team. They're led by Heisman contender Bryce Young, and I think they're going to easily Alabama's going to easily beat LSU 45-13. Tennessee at Kentucky. So despite Kentucky's loss to Mississippi State, I think they're a pretty good team. Their other loss was to Georgia. They have beaten LSU and Florida, who they're not great this year, but they're not bad. They're definitely not bad. They're, I'd say, above average teams. I think Kentucky will beat Tennessee, but I think it's going to be close. I have Kentucky 31-24. Next, we have Iowa visiting Northwestern. So Iowa hasn't been good since their win against Penn State. They lost to Purdue and Wisconsin, and now they're 6-2. Northwestern's 3-5 with only one win against a Big Ten opponent. That team is Rutgers. They beat, and Rutgers is just like Northwestern, not that good this year. I have Iowa winning in a boring, low-scoring game, 17-3. So Iowa has only scored 14 points in their previous two games against Purdue and against Wisconsin. Their offense is definitely not great, but their defense is. They're arguably the best defense, or I'd say a top 5 defense in the country. The best defense is definitely Georgia's defense. But I do think Iowa will come out with the win, despite not having a good offense, because their defense has carried them to wins this season, and they're probably going to do it again this week. Next, we have Boise State at Fresno State. Fresno State is home, and they're 7-2, with losses to Oregon and Hawaii. Fresno State should have beaten Hawaii, but I think they should still be 7-2 up to this point, because I think they should have beat Hawaii, but lost to UCLA. Fresno State, I do have coming out on top over a 4-4 Boise State team. I have them winning 34-24. Next, we have Oregon at Washington. So in the preseason, this was supposed to be an extremely tough test for Oregon going into Washington, and Washington was supposed to be a great team. However, they're 4-4. They're not that good. And I think Oregon, despite having some close calls against Cal and teams that are mediocre or a little below average like Cal, I think Oregon will beat Washington easily 38-14. Next up, we have Indiana at Michigan. Indiana isn't good this season, and Michigan's coming off their first loss in a heartbreaker to Michigan State. Michigan won't lose a second in a row, and they're especially not going to lose to Indiana at home. I have Michigan taking care of business, defeating Indiana 34-16. And the last game, we have San Diego State at Hawaii. San Diego State's coming off their first loss of the season with their loss to Fresno State last week. Fresno State lost to Hawaii, but I think San Diego State will come out on top against Hawaii 29-19. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment, and go check out the community tab so you can vote on some of the outcomes of tomorrow's games. So like, subscribe, comment, and go vote in the community tab, and I will see you Sunday for my updated playoff predictions and rankings.